All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're tackling one of the most exciting and honestly, sometimes nerve wracking early decisions for any marine aquarium beginner picking out your very first corals. If you're building a reef tank from scratch, you've probably figured out by now that corals aren't just colorful rocks. They are incredibly complex living organisms with very specific needs. And making the right choice early on can absolutely make or break your experience in the hobby. So we're going to break down the source material today to help you understand exactly what each major coral group needs and what trade-offs you should expect as you build your own underwater ecosystem. Here's how we're going to break it all down today. First, we'll look at the big coral decision itself. Then, we'll walk through soft corals, LPS, and SPS. After that, we'll talk about making your first choice. And finally, wrap up with the essential keys to coral survival. Let's get into it.
Section 1, the big coral decision, and navigating the acronyms. So when you're just starting out, flipping through a coral catalog can literally feel like you're trying to read a foreign language. There's alphabet soup everywhere. The first major acronym you're going to bump into is LPS. That simply stands for Large Polyp Stony Corals. And just like the name suggests, these guys are famous for their visible, really fleshy features. They've got these large, beautiful polyps you can actually watch moving around in the water, all built on top of a hard, stony skeleton underneath.
Then, on the flip side, you have SPS, which refers to small polyp stony corals. Now, unlike the LPS, these are all about their incredibly dense skeletal structures and tiny, sometimes barely even visible polyps. With SPS, the real visual draw is much more focused on those intricate, branching, or plating shapes of the skeleton itself.
Moving right along to Section 2, soft corals, the forgiving starter.
Okay, let's check out our first actual category. Soft corals are basically considered the ultimate starting point. Honestly, you can think of them as the training wheels of the reef hobby. Why? Well, unlike does LPS and SPS varieties we just talked about, soft corals do not grow a rigid, hard skeleton. This group includes really cool varieties like leathers and mushroom types, and because they don't have that stony base, they are incredibly flexible, adaptable, and super forgiving, which is exactly what you want in a beginner tank where your water chemistry might not be, absolutely perfect just yet. So what do they actually need to thrive? The good news is soft corals are pretty laid back when it comes to lighting and flow. A lot of them do fantastic with just moderate lighting and gentle to moderate water movement. Actually, some of them even prefer lower flow just so they can comfortably stretch out and breathe. But here's a vital warning from our source material. Even though they're adaptable, they absolutely hate nutrient roller coasters. You gotta keep things stable because wild swings in your water chemistry or your feeding schedule will definitely upset them. Now, what I really love about soft corals is that they are totally transparent with you about how they're feeling. They can be a bit dramatic. A happy, healthy soft coral is going to be fully expanded, stretching out into the water and showing off some really vibrant, stable colors. But if they get stressed out, say from one of those nutrient roller coasters we mentioned, they'll let you know immediately. They'll rapidly deflate, shrink up excessively, or just persistently hide away from the water column entirely.
All right, Section 3, LPS corals, the hardy middle ground.
Once you've kind of nailed down the basics of keeping a stable tank with soft corals, you might be ready to step up to LPS corals. These are a massive favorite for beginners. They give you those gorgeous, large, fleshy polyps we mentioned earlier, often growing in these awesome mound-like or branching shapes. We call them the hardy middle ground because you get that classic stony coral aesthetic, but they're way more tolerant of different tank conditions than the super delicate SPS types.
When we look at their care needs, they generally want moderate lighting. But the real make or break factor here is your flow. LPS corals need gentle to moderate water movement. If you hit them with a current that's way too strong, it literally stresses their fleshy tissue and physically stops those amazing large polyps from fully extending. Plus, because their polyps are so big, a lot of LPS highly benefit from targeted feeding with reef foods, especially if your tank doesn't have a ton of suspended nutrients floating around.
Just like the softies, LPS corals are great visual communicators. You'll know you're doing things right when you see full polyp extension. Basically, the polyps are out, they're flowing, and the fleshy tissue covering that stony skeleton is completely intact. But you really need to be careful here. If the flow is too crazy or your parameters are out of whack, a stressed LPS will show obvious tissue recession. That means that fleshy layer literally starts shrinking back tightly against the hard, sharp skeleton underneath. Moving to Section 4, SPS corals, the fastidious showstopper.
And here we are at the most advanced of the three main categories. SPS corals are without a doubt the absolute showstoppers of the reefing world.
Advanced hobbyists just obsess over them for their crisp growth tips, their insanely bright colors, and those dense, intricate skeletal structures. But of course, that kind of breathtaking beauty comes with a pretty steep price tag. They have very strict, high-maintenance requirements and demand fastidious husbandry. Looking at what they need, you can instantly see the step up in difficulty. SPS demand much higher light levels than soft or LPS corals. They also need very specific water flow, either a smooth laminar flow or a well-distributed turbulent flow, just to keep their tissue healthy and blow debris out of their dense branches. But the absolute golden rule here is stability. SPS are incredibly sensitive to even the slightest swings in salinity, temperature, nutrients, or trace elements. It's not enough to hit the perfect numbers once on a water test. You have to consistently keep them there. Honestly, this is the hard mode of the hobby. Figuring out if an SPS coral is healthy, that's a bit trickier too. Because they have those rigid skeletons and tiny polyps, the warning signs are a lot subtler. A healthy SPS is going to show consistent growth at its tips and keep its bright colors. But if it's stressed, it won't just dramatically deflate like a soft coral. Instead, early signs of poor light, flow, or chemistry show up as really slow tissue changes, maybe a gradual fading or paling of their color, or their growth just completely stalls out. Usually by the time you realize something's off, that stress has been building up for a while.
All right, section 5, making your first choice, the decision matrix.
So how do we turn all this into an actionable plan for your own aquarium? The reality is your choice shouldn't just be about pointing at the prettiest thing in the fish store. It needs to be driven by the equipment you have, how stable your tank is, and honestly, your dedication level. Pick soft corals if you want a forgiving start, while you learn the ropes of tank stability and flow. Go with LPS if you really want that visible, wavy polyp action and you're comfortable managing moderate light and some targeted feeding. And you should really only jump into SPS if you can guarantee rock-steady parameters, intense light, and pristine water quality. Oh, and here's a great pro tip from our source. A lot of successful beginners actually start with a mix. They'll grab some soft corals and maybe one LPS, just to carefully test how their tank responds to their daily maintenance routines.
Finally, section 6, keys to coral survival, treating the tank as a system.
No matter if you choose soft, LPS, or SPS, the source lays out 4 universal rules that literally mean the difference between it's settling in and it's not working. Step 1, start with stable placement. Give your new corals time to just acclimate and chill before you go drastically changing their light or flow. If you have to move them, do it slowly. Step 2, control your flow and detritus. Blasting them directly with strong current will shred delicate tissues, but leaving dead spots means harmful waste will just sit there right next to the coral. Step 3, keep those water parameters consistent with routine maintenance. Stability prevents the stress that causes color loss and tissue damage. And step 4, think about compatibility. Corals actually fight. They compete physically and chemically, so always make sure you give them plenty of personal space and maybe even create separate zones in your tank. I really want to highlight this specific quote from the source material today because it absolutely nails the single biggest takeaway for any beginner. Coral care becomes much easier when you treat your aquarium like a system. Stable water, appropriate light, intentional flow, and gradual adjustments. You really aren't just taking care of a single isolated coral on a rock. You are managing an entire, interconnected, stable ecosystem. So, armed with all this knowledge, I want you to take a good, hard look at your tank. Honestly evaluate your equipment, your patience, and your true commitment to keeping things stable. Which of these amazing life forms are you actually ready to bring home? Soft, LPS, or SPS? Which path are you going to choose to build your very first wreath?